Cahill, thanks, Minister. I wanted to ask, I know you finished up by saying that the amendments don't affect anybody that is eligible for the scheme, but I just wanted to ask about the reasoning behind the concluding year. So, first of all, just to say, some of the amendments that are listed here coming back from the Seanad, I do support, even though, as you know, at this stage, I don't support this bill because of the fact that it excludes anyone that was resident 6 months or less, and also that it excludes the boarded out, and I think that's a missed opportunity. Actually, to describe it as that is a bit of an understatement. It's just totally unfair and totally unequal. But in relation to specifically a concluding year, if that can be amended, if it's found to be wrong, what's sort of the reason for putting in a concluding year? Because, I mean, you'll understand that people who are going through this situation or who have been dealing with this for their whole lives in general have been continuously failed by the state, and understand we don't have a huge amount of trust. So then when you see like a table coming out with, you know, this table here, like with kind of the lists of names and the concluding year, I suppose the cynical part of me, being very honest, goes to like, what is that trying to prevent from happening? And I don't think really people can be, I think it's understandable why people, I mean, if I think like that, I can certainly understand why people who have been in the institutions or who have had experience of them or experience of the state's response to them to date would feel like that. So I just wanted to get clarity on that. And I suppose just to again put on the record, as it is probably one of the last, actually it is probably the last opportunity that we have to say that I really do feel it's a missed opportunity, and I think that people who were resident in the institutions, regardless of time frame, should be included. I think the boarded out should be included, and I think that the arbitrary 6 months cut off has only, you know, kind of served to really kind of create this hierarchy, which is totally and utterly unfair for people to think, well, if I was there for 6 months, I'm somehow, you know, entitled to this. And then if you weren't, if you were 6 months or less, you're not entitled to the payment. And I just think it's cruel, actually. That's the word I was looking for, cruel. And I want to just put that on record again, even though I've said this on several occasions at this stage. But just in particular, concluding year, I don't really fully grasp why that has to be in there if it turns out that that can be amended. Thanks, Cahill.
Minister. Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to the deputies for their contributions. In terms of the reasoning for the introduction of a concluding year, in terms of the county homes, so as I described earlier on, as I know many deputies will know, county homes had I suppose multiple purposes from the 1920s. They succeeded the poor houses and into the 30s and the 40s, and by the 1960s, many of them had ceased. Some hadn't ceased. Some developed, I suppose, into nursing homes provided for by the state, and some developed into hospitals, into mainstream hospitals, providing a whole range of mainstream services, including maternity services. And the scheme here was never intended to provide an ability to apply for a payment for somebody who gave birth in mainstream maternity services in a hospital that was the successor of a county home. And as the definitions currently stand, that's a possibility. And that's a possibility that, as I say, was never the intention, and is a possibility that we have to mitigate against. And that's what we're seeking to do in terms of the definitions and in terms of the addition of the concluding year. In terms of the matter raised by Senator Boyhan, the Commission found that St Kevin's Institution and St Patrick's Navan Road were described as being the same institution within the context of these institutions. St Kevin's Institution became St Kevin's Hospital, and it went on to form part of St James's Hospital. And this information as regards the co-location has come to light in recent years. In recent months. That's the reason for the changes being introduced in the Seanad. My officials have met with Senator Boyhan, and we, in keeping with the other amendment we're bringing forward here in terms of the ability to change a concluding date, if relevant evidence comes forward, we will continue with our engagements with him in terms of if there is a need to examine that particular date. A lot of work has been done in terms of the dates that have been established for the concluding years. But it is really important, and one thing that I requested my officials ensure was inserted in the bill is that we do have a capacity to amend the concluding year, and amend it by statutory instrument, not bring another bill through the Dáil, but do it through statutory instrument, because new information throughout this whole process has come to light when records are found and they identify new elements. So a lot of work has been brought out in terms of identifying those concluding dates, but we have put in a mechanism that if new information comes forward that casts doubt on some of those concluding dates, and bringing a concluding date forward would allow more people to be able to access the scheme. We have that capacity as provided for here. Deputy Sherlock, while recognising what you raise, and specifically in terms of the amendment, I think it's important points that you raise, and thank you for raising them. So I think it is important to say this scheme is not operational right now, and this scheme will be operational later on this year. The legislation is not passed. We hope to have this legislation passed today and sent to the President. There will be a detailed public information campaign issued once the legislation is operational. It'll be undertaken here in Ireland. It'll be undertaken abroad. It'll be done in plain English, and there will be a clear indication of how people apply under this particular scheme. There is no requirement to engage a solicitor in order to apply for this particular scheme, and we strongly encourage people not to engage with a solicitor in terms of this scheme. I can't tell, I'm always cautious in terms of telling people when they should or shouldn't engage in legal, but our advice is there is no need to do that at this stage. As I said, in advance of the scheme opening, we will there will be a comprehensive public awareness campaign. We are aware that there is a practice with some legal firms taking place, and we will be communicating with anybody who reaches out to us directly and giving our recommendation that there's no need for engagement. We also have a quarterly bulletin that we provide an update to people who've signed up to this. There's many hundreds of survivors and former residents have signed up to this update at the moment, and we'll make that clear in that update as well. So we will use those mechanisms for communicating with the former residents to let people know. As you know, we're also in the process now of appointing a special advocate for survivors of institutional abuse, and that person can also take a role in terms of giving advice as to there's no need to engage with legal firms. The legislation makes provision for financial support with legal advice in two situations. If someone needs to sign an affidavit because there aren't records available for them in the database that was developed by the Commission, we expect that the very significant majority of people who make an application, their dates of residence in an institution will be available within the database. And we say to everybody, there's no one, it's very unlikely anyone has their own documents. So the fact that you don't have documents, it should in no way discount your ability. In no way discounts your ability to apply under this particular scheme. Make the application. If it turns out there is a gap in information on an individual's particular case, there is the option under the legislation for someone to swear an affidavit. There's financial support provided for the legal process around swearing an affidavit. There is also a provision for some financial support at the end of the process if you seek legal advice before you sign the waiver and accept your payment. So those are the two circumstances within the bill where financial support is provided for anyone seeking legal advice. But our strong view is that there is no requirement to engage with a solicitor in order to access the scheme, and we'll continue to work to amplify that particular message. In terms of Deputy Connolly, you asked in terms of an update on engagement with the religious congregations. Again, that's a negotiation, so I don't think it'll serve a negotiation for me to provide a blow-by-blow account update, other than to say I have appointed Sheila Noonan to take a lead role in terms of those negotiations, in terms of those engagements with the religious congregations. In terms of the institutional burials bill, as you said, Daniel McSweeney has now been appointed to head up the agency that will undertake the intervention in Tuam. I know over recent weeks since his appointment, he's been engaging with families, with survivors, with former residents in the Tuam area. We made a decision that he'd undertake that engagement before undertaking any sort of public engagement. I understand in the next number of weeks he probably will undertake a wider public engagement in terms of an updating as to where that particular process is. Just in terms of, I suppose, issues to do with issues related to infant remains on other sites. In the last number of weeks, I gave approval for a small grant for a survivor group in Shanross to undertake ground truthing work outside of the identified infant cemetery in Shanross. They have concerns that the area enclosed and the actual site of infant burials may be wider there. So after some engagement with that organisation there, and I visited Shanross last summer, we're providing this support to them in terms of a piece of work that they're doing there. In terms of records, under the birth information and tracing legislation, over 9,000 people now have applied for their records from institutions, and over 5,000 people have received their records. And the two key institutions, the Adoption Authority of Ireland and TUSLA, are undertaking work to provide replies to all other applicants under the scheme. In that legislation, we introduced it's an offence to destroy records, and that offence is now on the statute book. When prior to indeed the Commission and reporting, my department took on an archivist to work to make public documents related to the institutions that are held by other bodies. So particularly for the county homes, a large number of documents would be held by the HSE. So there's an archivist working in my department to ensure that these can be transferred from the HSE under the normal provisions of the Records Act. If you want, Deputy, I can write to you separately if you want a more detailed update on that particular piece of work. I think the Sean McDermott Street plan is very important. It is one that was raised with me just very briefly after I became Minister, in terms of something that many people in this area saw as important, a site where records can be stored, records can be maintained, records can be accessed by individual record holders, and to an extent by historians as well, as is appropriate under a legislative framework. It will be run by the National Archives and in conjunction with the National Museum, and we have the capacity to have a record centre, but also memorial, a site of conscience as well, and also, of course, bring some benefit to the North Inner City in terms of some social housing and in terms of children's services there as well. So I think that's a hugely important step forward. And Deputy Connolly, I think I have on 3 occasions now answered the issue in respect of the report on illegal birth registrations in this House. I respectfully say I have. You've raised it on many times, and I have always given the reason.
I've only raised 2 issues. One is the lady, woman, I don't want to ask for her name to be removed, and the other issue was in relation to discussing it in the Dáil.
She did ask her, and I have confirmed this to you. With respect now, I have at least twice, but I will do it again. She did ask for her name to be removed, and we made the determination that this was a piece of work that she had taken on behalf of the government, and a piece of work that had been done, and we believe that should be published with her name. That was the situation there. We have discussed that report. I'm not sure if it was the subject of a full set of statements, but I've spoken about the report, and there were very significant follow-ups to that report in terms of the work that the former Special Rapporteur, Conor O'Mahony, did. The recommendation, the central recommendation, was that nothing more could be done in the space of illegal birth registrations. I didn't accept that. I asked Professor O'Mahony to do a piece of work. He did a substantial piece of work, and one of the provisions that we put in the information and tracing legislation was to allow TUSLA, allow either TUSLA or the Adoption Authority of Ireland, where they identify particular markers. You recall the term markers were used in that report in terms of suspicious entries on a particular file, to allow them investigate further. And that provision is there, and there is a team in TUSLA undertaking further work in that area. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Catherine. I just want to very briefly come back in just to make one or two points that I didn't get to say. But can I just ask, firstly, on a point of order, is there a vote on the overall bill at this point? There can still be a vote on the overall bill, is there? Am I right in that? Or
we're at amendment stage, I think.
I know, but once we go through the amendments, is there then a question that the bill now be passed, or?
I don't think so.
There isn't. Okay, I just wanted to check that.
It's amendments as the bill has arrived from the Seanad. Yes or no on amendments.
Okay, so just
It's changed. Why don't you bring it back to us and we don't have to vote on it?
So the bill.
No, I think that's the procedure in fairness, but I wasn't sure, so I just wanted to check.
So there are changes that the Seanad have agreed to. This House is asked to vote yea or nay on each of those changes, not on the whole thing, is my understanding.
Okay, I wasn't sure, but I thought that was the case. So I wanted to check. So for me, it's important then that I put on record that if there was a vote, because sometimes the procedure, as even some of us in here still get confused by it. Certainly, if you're watching and you've been following this debate, the procedure may be slightly confusing. And just to put on record for myself anyway, that if there was a vote on the overall bill, we'd be opposing it for the reasons that we'd set out before. And I just want to finally say, because in the last stall there was a number of debates on this, and into this stall, so that just in my time, that's 7 years, and that's obviously a very short amount of time compared to some people and what they've been living for. But I just want to say to all of the thousands of survivors that I have come across both here in Ireland and throughout the world, I want to thank them for their courage, for their bravery, for sharing their stories. I've always been struck by every single time we speak about this, how somebody new comes forward to me to tell me their story, and I always feel like that's such a personal thing and such a difficult thing for somebody to do, and I just want them to know that, that wasn't taken for granted, certainly by me, and I know by other deputies on the opposition benches as well, and I want just to let them know that their contribution behind the scenes has been invaluable. Their fight to be heard was dignified and honourable, and I want to really just reassure them that I heard you, I listened to you, and from the bottom of my heart I thank you for all of the work that you have done, and I'm sure will continue to do, because I absolutely would agree with what I think Deputy Sherlock said, or Deputy Connolly, that this will be going to the courts, I would imagine. It'll be tested there, and I imagine that the fight will continue. But just to acknowledge their role, and also I suppose to put it on record, if there isn't an overall vote, that if there was, we would be opposing it. Thank you, Catherine.